Okay, good afternoon or evening or whatever time it is where you're joining us from. I am Susan Macbeth, the founder and owner of Adventures by the Book based in San Diego. And we're excited to welcome you to another edition of our Adventures by the Book Club. It alternates every month with our 7 different ambassadors. And this month we have a hybrid book club. So it's in person at the Harrison, New York Public Library. And it's also being broadcast via Zoom for those of you who are joining us from many, many different states, as well as 3 different countries, Canada, England, and United States. So we're excited to have a great turnout for today's show featuring Jennifer Coburn. And I did want to thank our ambassador, Giovanna, with the Harrison Public Library for hosting the event today. They are doing it in person, as I mentioned, as well as via Zoom. So she's monitoring a lot at the same time, and we appreciate her doing that. And all the work she does. I see one of our other ambassadors, at least one of our other ambassadors, Dorothy, in the audience. So welcome, Dorothy, and welcome all of you who are joining us from all around the world. So upcoming events that we have, if you are joining us virtually, we have our next Adventures by the Book Club on Wednesday, June 11th with author Rebecca Rosenberg, who will be talking about her book, Silver Echoes. And that'll be fun, hosted by some of our different ambassadors. If you're also joining us via Zoom, you can tune in on June 10th for an event with New York Times bestselling author Christina McMorris. And this is a special event that we're doing a little bit differently because we are working with the publisher, Source Books, who also happens to be Jennifer's publisher, on a fun promotion. So if you purchase a copy of her book, Christina's new book, The Girls of Good Fortune, by May 20th, which is coming up very quickly, on our website, adventuresbythebook.com. It's paperback. It's only like $18. You'll not only get a signed book, but you can enter into a drawing for special prizes that the publisher is promoting. And also you'll be invited to a special Zoom tour of the Shanghai tunnels in Portland, Oregon, which is what her new book is based on. So it's going to be a really fascinating experience. So, for $18, you get an hour of entertainment with the event. You get hours of entertainment with the book. You get a fun experience. It'll be really, really a good time. And then if you're in the San Diego or Southern California area, our next in-person event is this Monday and Tuesday, May 12th and 13th. Sorry, I'm just muting a few people. Just keep in mind to keep your microphone muted, please, while we're chatting. And you'll have a chance to chat and ask Q&A afterwards, no problem. But May 12th and 13th, Monday and Tuesday, we're doing one event at the Carlsbad Library in North County, San Diego, and one on Tuesday at the Coronado Public Library. And it's for AAPI month, Asian American Pacific Islander month. And we have 4 fabulous authors joining us at both of those events. So just go to our website, adventuresbythebook.com, and you can find out more. But I don't want to waste any more time talking about us because we are excited to talk with Jennifer. And so I want to introduce and thank again Giovanna Iannace with the Harrison, New York Public Library. I guess I should say Harrison Public Library because you're not part of the New York system, but just wanted to clarify that it is in New York, and where Jennifer is live, but also via Zoom. So I'm going to let her take it away. But as they're talking, please make sure that you think of your questions so that at the end you can ask. You can ask live since we're in meeting format and not in webinar format. Jennifer loves answering questions, so feel free to wrap them up and ask at the end. So now I will leave it to Giovanna to take it away and introduce our author and get the conversation started. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. It's my pleasure to welcome Jennifer Coburn to the Harrison Public Library, who's joining us. You're from San Diego, so this is quite a trek for you, and we're so happy to have you here. And also, I wanted to give a thank you to the Village Bookstore in Pleasantville, New York, because they're here with us also on site selling Jennifer's book. So if anyone would like to get it signed, purchased and signed, you can do that. So Jennifer is the author of the USA Today bestseller, The Girls of the Glimmer Factory and Cradles of the Reich, historical novels about the strength of women's friendship and the connections that can be forged during even the most harrowing of times. She has also published a mother-daughter travel memoir called We'll Always Have Paris, as well as 6 contemporary women's novels. Additionally, Jennifer has contributed to 5 literary anthologies, including A Paris All Your Own. Jennifer lives in San Diego with her husband, William. Their daughter, Katie, is currently in graduate school. When Jennifer is not going down historical research rabbit holes, she volunteers with So Say We All, a live storytelling organization where she is a performer, producer, and performance coach. She is also a volunteer with Reality Changers, a nonprofit that supports low-income high school students in becoming the first in their families to attend college. She specializes in college essay development, interview prep, and nagging. So without further ado, please welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that introduction, Giovanna, and thank you to the Harrison Public Library and to Adventures by the Book. And hi everybody on Zoom, and also the Village Bookstore for being here. So why does a nice Jewish girl like me write novels about a Nazi propaganda camp and a Nazi breeding program? As I was writing my novels, I was asked this question over and over again. And finally, I just said, Mom, enough. Thank you. But the reason the way I became interested in this period is when I was growing up in New York City in the 1970s and 80s, my father used to share with me his memories of growing up in Brooklyn in the 1930s and 40s, and how his parents heard about the persecution of Jews in Europe and what fear and anxiety this caused in them. And they had a plan for what they would do if the Nazis realized their dream of crossing the Atlantic Ocean and persecuting Jewish people here in the United States as well. Here's my grandparents' worldview in November 1938. There were their 3 children, Shelley, Rita, and Bernice, and also what they saw in the newspapers. The pogroms that swept across Germany and Austria that the Nazis called Kristallnacht. So my grandparents made this plan that should the need arise, they would hide my father, the adorable toddler in the center, with the German Christian family that lived downstairs in their 2-family house. They offered to adopt my father to keep him safe. My Aunt Bernice was Gentile passing. So if you put a cross around her neck and told people that she was Christian, they would believe it. So there was a convent in upstate New York, and the parish in Brooklyn had an arrangement with them that they would hide 9 Jewish girls if needed. My Aunt Rita, however, had polio, so she walked with a limp. And even if righteous Gentiles like the Kale family downstairs, and even if the Catholic Church wanted to help my Aunt Rita, there would be no hope for her because of the Nazis' position on people with disabilities. So hearing this story throughout my life, I really wondered how something like this could happen and what it would be like to live in Europe as a Jewish person in the 30s and 40s and watch the discrimination against Jews and the anti-Semitism rise, and to keep hearing from people that, wait it out, it'll get better, it's not that bad, it'll pass. Or worse, it is that bad, but this is something that the Jewish people brought on themselves, that it is our own fault. So I became fascinated by how the Nazis effectively used propaganda to transform a civilized society like Germany into a cult of madness. Because if a dictator in Germany could convince the public that lies were truth and fiction was fact, then it could happen anywhere, even here. As I was researching my novel Cradles of the Reich, I started looking into the question I had was what would make young women think it was a good idea to volunteer to have sex with Nazi officers that they had never met in order to become pregnant and then have a baby for the Reich. And it always came back to propaganda. I saw examples that I had known about, like Der Gilfpilz, which is a children's book. And this book translates to the poisonous mushroom. And children who were 3 and 4 and 5 years old were read this book that told them essentially that the Jewish people, like mushrooms, may look harmless, but make no mistake, we can be poisonous and kill you. And then, of course, there were the propaganda films that were aimed at an adult audience. The Nazi Ministry of Propaganda also had its very own board game division, where they developed games like their version of Parcheesi. They also had a game called Judenraus, which meant Jews out. And the object of that game was to run 6 Jewish pegs off to Palestine. And lest you think that that was a game that kids were playing without their parents' knowledge, no, this was a family game night. Oma and Opa and mom and dad were around the dining room table playing this game shamelessly. What I hadn't realized was that the Nazis created an entirely separate concentration camp for propaganda purposes. As they were drafting the final solution, the genocide of European Jews, the Nazis knew that the world was going to start asking questions and that humanitarian organizations were going to hear about the mistreatment of Jewish people. So they needed a place to bring inspectors and show them, or rather convince them, that the Jews were living well under Nazi occupation, and that anything that they heard about death camps or mistreatment was rumors made up by the Lügenpresse, which means the lying news, or Jewish sensationalists. Theresienstadt became the Nazis' show camp, not only for humanitarian organizations like the Red Cross, but also for propaganda films. They made one that was called, in the vernacular, Hitler Gives a City to the Jews. And it was purported to be a documentary film about life in the Jewish settlement. But every moment of this propaganda film was staged to the minute. These children were well dressed, and they were placed in a playground that had been built just weeks earlier. And these kids were told that when the commandant and the Red Cross contingent crosses this street, they were to let their ball roll out in front of the commandant so that he could bend down, pick it up, and say, "Children, be careful with your toys." And then the children were to say, "Uncle Ram, are we having sardines for dinner again tonight?" And he said, "I'm afraid so, children." Well, these kids did not call the commandant Uncle Ram, nor did they have sardines for dinner. They also created a soccer stadium, a makeshift soccer stadium, where when the Red Cross visited, they entered just as a victorious goal was being scored. So it looked like there was a lot of fun and excitement in Theresienstadt. For both the film and the Red Cross tour, the hospital was emptied of all of its sick and elderly prisoners. And in the beds were relatively healthy bodies, so that they could say, here in the infirmary, we're treating cases of the sniffles and sprained ankles. But what really happened was days before the Red Cross inspection, 7,503 sick and elderly prisoners were transported to Auschwitz. And they did this so that the camp would look less crowded and so that it would also look younger and healthier. In preparation for the Red Cross tour, the Nazis launched a beautification program where they built a playground. They also built a music pavilion. They had stores that were stocked with goods that were stolen from the Jewish people upon arrival. And they had these adorable little signs. This isn't a great picture because it's black and white, but they were hand-carved wooden signs and whimsically painted to direct people to the playground or to the music pavilion. And more than 1,000 flowers were imported and then planted in the market plots, which is the town square. The tour was a success, and I call it a tour rather than an inspection because the Commandant had an itinerary that was exactly where they're going to go and which prisoners they were going to talk to. And the inspectors never said, we want to go off the schedule. We want to talk to this person. We want to see this place. It was an 8-hour inspection on June 23rd, 1944. In attendance were 12 men, 3 members of the Red Cross, 8 SS men, and 1 prisoner who they called the mayor of Theresienstadt. He was actually the head of the Council of Jewish Elders. And at the end of this tour, the head of the Red Cross said, your Jews are living better here in Theresienstadt than anyone else in Europe right now. And we don't need to see any more. We can skip our inspection of Auschwitz. I almost wrote about Theresienstadt in my novel, Cradles of the Reich, but the more I started learning about this propaganda camp, the more I realized, this needs its own book. It needs its own story. It needs its own cast of characters. Music was an important element in Theresienstadt. I wanted to talk about that. And I wanted to really tell this story of the camp through the lens of women's friendships. So let me get us situated on the world map. Theresienstadt was located in the Czech village of Terezín, which is 40 miles north of Prague in what was once Czechoslovakia, now the Czech Republic, and the Nazis rebranded Czechoslovakia during occupation as the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia. And it's just south of the German border. Terezín is 3.5 square miles. And what the Nazis considered most attractive about this site was a military base had already been built there in 1790. The Emperor of Austria, Joseph, built this military site and named it for his mother, Teresa, which is why it is Theresienstadt. And there were already 11 barracks and administration buildings there. So it was perfect to be converted, a perfect place to be converted into a concentration camp. But what was built to house 7,000 soldiers held captive an average of 40,000 prisoners at a time. That was on average, and at its height, 60,000. In the course of its 3.5 years, 155,000 prisoners passed through the gates of Theresienstadt, some for a few days and others for years. 88,000 of those people were sent to death camps in the East. 33,000 died at Theresienstadt from starvation and disease, and 34,000 survived the war. About the book. Theresienstadt is the setting for the Girls of the Glimmer Factory, but ultimately this is a story about women lifting one another up and helping each other become the heroes, the heroines that we were always meant to be. The novel centers around Hannah Kaufman, who is a Jewish young woman sent to Theresienstadt with her grandfather, Oscar, who was a veteran of the Great War, World War I. And he was told that he's being sent to Theresienstadt as a reward because it was a privileged camp, and this is the Nazis' way of saying thank you to soldiers who fought for Germany in World War I. And like a lot of Jewish people, Oscar was offered the opportunity to pay a little extra to buy a cottage by the lake. But when he and Hannah arrive at Theresienstadt, they're faced with the grim reality that there is no lake and there are certainly no cottages there. They are expected to live in military barracks. They're given meager rations, and they are forced to provide slave labor for the German war effort. One of the jobs that the women could have at Theresienstadt was working at the Glimmer factory, which is a mica splitting production workshop. Mica is a soft mineral that has glimmering properties, and it is also a natural electrical insulator. So the women who worked here, they had no idea why the Nazis wanted them to cut this stone, but they knew that they were relatively fortunate to be in the Glimmer factory because as long as they were meeting their production quotas, they would not be sent east. But what the Nazis were doing with these little chips of mica was stuffing them into the tubes of Luftwaffe planes so that they would reduce the risk of electrical shorts, fires, and downed communications in the airplanes. And here I am in my kitchen in San Diego, splitting mica so that I could get a better sense of the hand cramping, tedious work. So at Theresienstadt, Hannah meets up with friends that she had in Prague, and they formed a resistance group, which they invite Hannah to join. She wants no part of this. All she wants to do is keep her head down, stay safe, and survive the war. But fate has other plans for Hannah. Meanwhile, in Berlin, Hannah's childhood friend Hilda Kramer is working at the Nazi Ministry of Propaganda, and she's been assigned to work on the film Hitler Gives a City to the Jews. It's been 8 years since the women have seen one another, but once they face off, each is given the opportunity to discover who she really is at the core. When writing any historical novel, it is important to give your readers an accurate sense of time and place. But when you're writing a book about the dangers of propaganda, it is critical that you do your research and get the facts right. So in researching Girls of the Glimmer Factory, I consulted with 22 subject matter experts, including scholars of the Holocaust, of this camp, of German and Czech filmmaking techniques of the era, a food historian, which, like, who knew that was a job, an architectural historian, and even an expert in the mica splitting production workshop. But after 2 years of doing this research here in the United States, it became very clear to me that I needed to go to the Czech Republic, and I needed to walk the grounds and breathe the air that my characters had. So I contacted an archivist in Terezin, and we had been communicating by email over the last 2 years. And I said to him, hey, I see online that you have preserved the Magdeburg barracks perfectly, and that the bunk beds are still there, and the suitcases and the prisoners' clothing. And I want to get as close to the subject matter as possible to give readers an authentic experience as much as I can, being a person living here and now. But what do you say? What do you say you let me sleep in one of these bunk beds? And he replied, Miss Coburn, this is a museum. No, you cannot sleep in the bunk beds. So I did the next best thing, and I found a small hotel, which was once prisoner housing, and it was converted to the coffee house for the purposes of the film and the Red Cross inspection. And here is what it looks like today. It's right there on the market plots, the town square. I arrived in Terezin at sunset, and the first thing I saw was the train tracks. The same tracks that brought 55,000 people from all across Europe into Theresienstadt and also took 88,000 prisoners to the east. Theresienstadt was a hellish place, but what the Nazis did not account for was the emergence of a vibrant cultural scene. Over its 3.5 years of existence, more than 5,000 pieces of visual art were created. From children's sketches to oil paintings by some of Europe's most renowned artists and craftspeople. The Hanukkiah that you see on the far right or left, depending on where you are, was made by two prisoners, Arnold Zadekow and Leopold Hatz. These gentlemen stole lindenwood from the Nazis, and then after their full day of slave labor, and even though they had eaten starvation rations and were living in squalor, they found the strength to, first of all, steal from the Nazis, and then secondly, to create this beautiful Hanukkiah, which is an exquisite piece of craftsmanship. But what I think is the loveliest, most beautiful thing about this piece is that if you look at the candle holders, they have been used, they're darkened. And the prisoners lit candles and celebrated the Hanukkah Festival of Lights. Who has seen one of these toy dogs? You press down the tail and the dog pops up. Anyone? Okay, yeah. So this toy dog saved the life of Yuri Lauscher, who was a prisoner at Theresienstadt, as was his wife and their 2 children. He was a carpenter in Prague, and he saved this dog for, in case he was put on the transport list, which he was. And when he and the rest of his family were put on the list, he approached the commandant and said, I made this toy for your children, and if you like it, you should take me and my family off the transport list. I will start a workshop here to teach others how to make these toys, and we'll send the toys back to Germany for the children. And the commandant said, okay. And that is how Yuri Lauscher saved his family's life. It was good news for him, but bad news for 4 other prisoners, because the Nazis always sent round numbers on their transports. And this transport was for 1,000, so 4 others went in Yuri Lauscher's place. At Theresienstadt, there were also 500 musical performances. The gentleman that you see with his back toward the camera, that is Raphael Schechter. And that's not a name that we hear very often today, but it is kind of the equivalent of me saying Leonard Bernstein was at the camp. He was a very famous composer, conductor, and musician. And he found an old piano in a basement, and he taught a group of prisoners how to sing Verdi's Requiem. They had no paper, they just had to learn the lyrics. And if you're interested in the story of this choir, there's a documentary called The Defiant Requiem. The reason that it's called The Defiant Requiem is this performance was done 16 times at the camp, and once it was done for the Nazis. The prisoners were very grateful to Raphael Schechter for starting this choir. They said that the time that they spent singing was like hours of freedom. But they asked, when we have so much beautiful music from our Jewish faith, why are you teaching us a Catholic funereal mass in Latin? And he said to them, I am giving you the chance to say to the Nazis, rather to sing to the Nazis, what we cannot say to them. And that is, one day, God will be your judge and justice will be served. there was a children's opera performed called Brundibar, and that was the hottest ticket in Theresienstadt. It was performed 55 times. And when I say it was a hot ticket, it is not just a figure of speech. There were actual tickets issued for these shows, and the shows were reviewed. There were 7 arts magazines that teenage boys created. Here's the cast of Brundibar. And one of the greatest misconceptions about Theresienstadt is that the Nazis created it as an arts camp. It's not true. It's what I thought when I started researching this camp, but it was really only the need to create and the creative desire to create that made these arts possible. At first, the Nazis prohibited these performances. Then they tolerated them. And then once they saw the level of production that was coming out of the camp, they decided to use it for their propagandic needs. So on my second day in Terezin, I had a meeting with the archivist there, the one who had told me I cannot sleep in his museum. And I said, I'm scheduled for a tour after this, but I've come to this camp with 55 questions that I could not get answered, even with my 22 subject matter experts. And I have places that I want to see that are not going to be on your general tour. What do you say I get a private tour? And he said, no, we don't offer that. We only do tours for 10. So I said, how about this? I will buy 10 tickets and I will make it a private tour. And he said, please don't do that, because our mission here is to tell the world what happened in Theresienstadt. And if you buy 10 tickets, we're going to be denying 9 others the chance to learn. So here's Zoom. So he said, don't buy all 10 tickets. And I said, all right, listen, I'm going to go on your tour of 10, but I am warning you, I'm probably going to be a little annoying to the others on the tour. And he said, I have no doubt about that. So I stepped outside and I saw the tour guide, Rosa, and she said, oh, you must be Jennifer. And the reason I know that is because I just got a text from the tour group in Prague. 9 of them just canceled. So I hope it's okay. It's just going to be the 2 of us. I said, Rosa, it's going to be fine. I'm writing a book, and I have a lot of things that I need to see. So I don't know if you believe in this sort of thing, but I will say, if you do, thank you, ancestors, because not only did I get my private tour, I only had to buy 1 ticket. That's how I know it was my ancestors. So I said to Rosa, I am writing a novel. I have places I need to see, things I need to ask you. She didn't miss a single beat. She said, get in my car. And she then gave me a 4-hour private tour, custom tailored to my research needs. And it was great because she showed up the next day at my hotel and she said, I really liked hanging out with you. I'm going to come pick you up after work tonight, and I'm taking you to the neighboring village of Lüdemeritz, where I live, and I'm going to take you to my church. I'm going to take you to my house, and I'm going to take you out to dinner at my favorite restaurant, which she did. But after 5 days in this camp, has anybody visited Terezin here? You 2 times. Okay, so you know it's a day trip. Yeah, it's a tour. Buses come in at 10 o'clock. They leave at 4. Everybody has seen everything. It's 3.5 square miles. Day 5 began, and I realized I have seen everything twice. I had been to the Magdeburg barracks, where I am not permitted to sleep, but nothing could stop me from sitting on the floor and taking in the environment. I had also been to the secret synagogue, where prisoners held services, and prominent in housing. This is where you got to sleep if you were a high status prisoner. And every night I went to the marketplatz and I listened to Verdi's Requiem, and I wrote my author's note. if you are a history buff and you love author's notes and you like to know how authors do their research, I'm going to urge you to read the author's note before the book, because it'll explain to you how I did the research, where I took some creative liberty, and then if I changed the times of events or what the actual times were. So after seeing all this and spending all this time there, I thought, you know what? I think I've done everything. Maybe I'll just go back to Prague. Maybe I'll do some sightseeing. But before I do, I'm going to go and spend a few minutes at the memorial site, which is a burial ground. I'm going to spend some time asking myself, like, is there any stone that I have left unturned? Is there anything that I can do that I can learn more in service to this story? And my phone pinged. And it was a friend of mine who said, I see on Facebook that you're in Terezin. And I have a friend at Hudita, you know how you tag people on social media. She is an expert in Terezin and she might be able to help you. Another ping. Hi, it's Hudita. No, I can't help you. But I have a friend who is a high school principal, and he has a group of students who are doing a long-term research project in Terezin, and I think they may be there today. If they are, would you like me to connect you with them? So 10 minutes later, I was meeting with this group of students who were doing a documentary film on the history of a photo album that had been recently discovered in Terezin. And why it was historically significant is most of the photos that humanity has, is the propaganda photos that were taken. But this was real life in Terezin, and it was taken with a contraband camera by the prisoners. So I spent the morning with them, and I thought it was a beautiful irony to be with students who are making a real documentary film, given the history of the Nazi propaganda film. And I went to lunch with the group, and I met the two other groups that were doing their research. And one was a group that was going into homes in Terezin and tearing up floorboards and knocking into walls. And I thought, that sounds like fun. I'm going to do that. But these teenage boys said to me, don't go with them, Miss Jen. Come with us, and we're going to show you something really special. So I followed these three little rascals through a slash in a chain link fence, which I am certain they slashed. And they showed me hundreds of prisoner etchings carved into the brick and sandstone of one of the many tunnels and underpasses in Terezin. They were prisoner names, transport numbers, and even some sketches, all to tell the world we were here. Our lives mattered. Please remember us. So it is in that spirit that I wrote the story of Hannah Kaufman and her fellow prisoners, and how they helped one another survive through sharing food, information, music, and love. My novel is a small tribute to them. Thank you. Thank you.
So we'll stop sharing.
Okay, yeah, let's stop sharing.
Trying to scoot over.
Here, let me not.
Oh,
Yes.
sorry.
No, that's okay. I don't want you to knock over the
Okay.
water and ruin your computer.
So we're gonna stop sharing as soon as I press this button.
Oh, cool.
And what I'm also gonna do is turn on the video so people can see you. If you stand in front of the, well, it's like you're right in the room with us. So that's even better.
We're in the room where it happened. All right.
So we can open the floor to questions. If not, I'm happy to start us off. I did read the book. I couldn't stop once I started, even though a certainty of the ending, it still kept me engaged. And you mentioned the rabbit hole of research. your details are wonderful. And I do recommend also the author's note. If you read that first, there's just so much. I had to read it more than once actually, because there's just so much in it. And just to wrap my head over around everything that's included in the novel. How many years did that take you to really feel I have enough now and I can write my story?
So, 3 years, start to finish. That's the short answer. I research as I go, and I don't know what I need to know until I need to know it. So there is some basic research that I do, and then I keep researching as the story progresses.
So 3 years also writing the book
Mhm.
and then editing it and getting it to its finished stage. Wow. That's
Yeah.
pretty
Finished,
incredible.
yes,
Yeah.
finished is a relative term.
Well, because you never feel like it's completely done. There's always
Mhm.
more to say. So you knew the story, you had it mapped out in your head, I would think, how the story would progress. And throughout the novel, Hannah wants to be an archaeologist.
Mhm.
But by the end, she chooses, and it's not really a spoiler because it's not really central to the story, she becomes a psychologist, right? So, and there are so much happens in her early life to bring her to that decision. But as you're writing the book, did you know how the characters would fare? Like we pretty much wanted to have Hannah because she's the heroine of the story. Did you know with certainty, because your characters are so real, but and some are based on real people that lived, but did you know more or less how their story would unfold?
There were surprises along the way. I knew how Hannah's story would unfold because Hannah is a representation of hope,
Mhm.
and Hilda is a representation of Germany and how a country descends into madness.
Any questions from people at home or even people sitting? Oh, sorry, if someone texted
Oh
in,
yeah.
is Susan there? Or you can look in the chat box.
Yeah, I'm here, and I was actually going to invite Rochelle if she would like. I'm going to ask her to unmute herself so she can ask directly, but if she doesn't feel comfortable doing that, I'm happy to answer her question. But it's kind of fun to get an interactive, and I'm just keeping talking until I can find her on the list of, so I can ask her to invite. All right, there you are, Rochelle. I've asked you to unmute if you want to ask your question live.
She can press on the space bar too, if she just doesn't want to completely unmute.
Okay, if you don't want to unmute, no problem. Her question is, are you working on a World War II novel next where you can use some of the other research that didn't make the book? Good
Oh,
question. Thank you, Rochelle.
that's a great question because a lot of times the research does not make the book. There is a whole there's a whole group of children that arrived in Theresienstadt, the Bialystock orphans, and I had a draft where they showed up at the camp as they did in real life, but it just didn't make the final cut. And then there was a wonderful character, really a real person named Freddie Hirsch, and he was not in the book, but he was in the draft. I don't know the answer to that question because I don't know. I know only the book that's coming next, which is set in 1955, Greenwich Village. The working title is The Greenwich Village Fiance, and it is loosely based on my mother's experiences as a beard, which is a fake girlfriend for gay men in 1955 Greenwich Village. So you will find out if you read Cradles of the Reich and you wondered, hey, whatever happened to Gundi? She will make a cameo as Irma makes a cameo in Girls of the Glimmer Factory.
So related to that question, because there's a big gap where the story ends with the factory and then into the future 40 plus years later. Any thought to revisiting that period in between? There's a very heart your heart's beating when at one pivotal moment towards the end of the book, And then it sort of fast forwards to the future, to the present, so to speak. Any thought of filling in that, how she survives, or is that too?
No, because that's the boring part of life. That is the, no, that's like, I don't, unless I had an idea for something that happened to her, I would have Hannah goes and buys a dozen eggs. Hannah goes and buys a bra. You know, I mean, these are not the things that
Right.
that advance a novel. And I don't know what that driving action would be.
Because from the moment that her survival is somewhat guaranteed, there's still so much uncertainty if she'll really make it. And then obviously she does, but so much happens to her and the little girl, Danusha, just to fathom what that experience would have been like for them. But yes, once they found safety, because they did have to hide for a number of months and all of that. So, okay, so that's fair.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it would have to be something that happened, something dramatic that happened. Like Hannah is pregnant and almost dies in childbirth, and that would be the drama of the story. Yes, Rachel.
Did you meet any Theresienstadt survivors?
Okay, this is my very best friend. We met in 5th grade in New York City at PS 40. So I'm really so pleased that she's here. She's having a house party for me tomorrow night. And this is somewhat of a plant because she knows that I have. I didn't meet a Theresienstadt survivor, but I did connect with an Auschwitz survivor. 2 Auschwitz survivors, and one I just had lunch with on Sunday. Her name is Tova Friedman, and her book is called Daughter of Auschwitz. It's her memoir of her early childhood in the notorious death camp. And I also met the daughter of, remember when I showed you the chorus for Brundabar, and there was, you can see this picture online as well. If you look really closely, you'll see one of the characters, she's dressed like a cat, and that's Ella Steinova. When I was doing a house party, like the one I'll be doing at Rachel's house tomorrow night, one of the women said, you know, Ella Steinova was our neighbor for many years, and she passed away, sadly, but her daughter is in contact with us. So I'd love to introduce you. So Tammy is her daughter, she and I consulted on her mother's dialogue in the epilogue. And then she came to see me at an event at a country club in South Carolina, and she brought with her her mother's Jewish star, her yellow star. She also brought ghetto gelt, which is the fake money that was issued in Theresienstadt. And she brought a piece of artwork, like a little wood carving that she made at Theresienstadt, because the children were able to take art lessons from a woman named Friedel Dicker Brandeis. And Friedel Dicker Brandeis did not survive the war. She perished at Auschwitz, but she was an Austrian Bauhaus artist. She is widely regarded as the mother of art therapy, because at Theresienstadt, she had the children for classes, and she'd say to them, let's draw pictures of what our life before the war looked like. And then tomorrow, let's do collage work about our fears and our anxieties. And that is where art therapy was born.
And I'm going to unmute Eileen because she had a question for you. Eileen, if you want to accept that unmute, and you can ask your question live. And if not, I'll ask it for you.
Hi, Eileen.
Hi. I was just wondering if the books should be read in any particular order.
No, they are standalone books, but if you are the kind of person that really likes things to go chronologically, Cradles of the Reich takes place in 1939, and Girls of the Glimmer Factory begins in 1941.
Okay, thank you.
So it's really your choice, but you know.
Thank you, Eileen. And we have another question from Rochelle. So I'm going to unmute Rochelle, I'm sorry, so she can ask her question. Go ahead, Rochelle.
Hi, Rochelle.
Are you there? Okay, I'll ask her question for her because I know some people are having trouble with their the technology. So she wants to know where any of the x-rays of the workers who worked with the mica ever recovered or kept.
The x-rays?
That's what the question is.
The x-rays.
Well, you mentioned how one person had
So
glimmering.
one person was interviewed for the Shoah project. And I'm sorry, it wasn't the Shoah project. It's in the author's note. It was similar to the Shoah project where they interview survivors. And her doctor took an x-ray of her lungs and said, your lungs are glittering. And there was a increased risk of respiratory disease and lung disease if you worked in the glimmer factory. Short term, it was a way to save your life during the war, but it did have health repercussions.
Thank you. Thank you for your question, Rochelle. Any other questions?
Well, I have two quick questions, or maybe not so quick, but central to the story are the young infants that get taken, smuggled out. Did that actually occur, and was there a way to record that activity?
So several things in the novel are other events that happened around Europe, and I wanted to bring them to Theresienstadt to spotlight them, even though they didn't happen there. This particular baby smuggling operation is homage to Nicholas Winton's smuggling of, not smuggling, but his kinder transport of 669 children who he helped leave Prague. There's also an example of in the camp, there is a workshop where they are creating a museum of Jewish diaspora, and that workshop did exist, but it existed in Prague, not in Terezin. But I thought it was really interesting that Eichmann wanted to create a museum of the extinct people of the extinct Jewish race. And it was kind of like, you know, how we take our children to the Museum of Natural History. He saw a Germany, or a Europe really, where Aryans would take their children and say, once long ago, the Jews existed, and here are their Torahs, and here are their menorahs and Hanukkahs and their finials. But I thought that was such an interesting idea, or I mean, interesting and horrifying, that I brought a satellite workshop to Theresienstadt, and that was not there. But it's all laid out for you. It's all laid out for you in the 14-page author's note.
Yes, it is. And then
Thank you. And sorry, I was just gonna say we have another question in the
please,
chat box. So I'm going to ask Ellen to unmute herself, and then she can ask her question live. So Ellen.
Okay. Did I'd love to know if the author ever met up with any of Hannah's family in Palestine?
I'm sorry, the what? Did she meet up with
you ever meet with Hannah's family in Palestine?
So Hannah is a fictional character, and she is the history is real, but Hannah and Hilda are characters that I created to convey a message that I wanted to about hope and about women's friendship. So there is no Hannah Kaufman, so I could not meet with her family in Palestine, but I did meet with survivors, and it was a real honor and a privilege to do so.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you for your question, Ellen. And Giovanna, you had another question?
A quick question, because within the novel, the residents, for lack of a better term, do exchange some letters, postcards, and you mentioned how they were hidden messages based on the script, the way, the direction the letters were appointed.
Mhm.
Is that based
That
on?
is
Wow.
true. And that was something that happened at many of the camps. So one of the questions, let me back up and tell you what we're talking about. So when you arrive at a concentration camp, the Nazis had the prisoners write a postcard to their loved ones and say, I'm here at Auschwitz, things are great. Looks like it's going to be a wonderful experience. And then they were promptly escorted to the gas chambers. So when these prisoners wanted to let their loved ones know that what I'm saying to you is not true, but this is a postcard that is going to be read by the Nazis, so I have to say what is scripted for me. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the lines of text point down to say things are looking down. And if the script was level, it would mean what I'm saying to you is true. So that is fact-based. And I have never been able to answer the question, how did they all know to do this? Because it happened at many camps. So was that something that people did in Europe beforehand? And how widely known was it? So that because the Nazis didn't know, but that is something that did happen. And there is a scene in the book where prisoners attempt to smuggle letters that tell the truth about what's going on in Theresienstadt. They attempt to smuggle them out of the camp.
Thank you.
Wow.
And our time is winding down, so we probably have time for one last question. So I'm going to unmute Carol, who has a question for you, Jennifer.
Hi, Carol.
Hi, I was wondering, was the camp only for Jews, or were other people the Nazis didn't like, such as Jehovah's Witnesses, put in that same camp as well?
They were, it was primarily for Jewish people. In the Holocaust as a whole, 11 million people were murdered, 6 million of them Jews, 5 million others, and Theresienstadt was like the rest of the camps, mostly Jewish people, but there were what the Nazis called Mischlinge, which is half, people who have one parent who is Catholic or Christian or not Jewish, and the other parent who is. There were also political dissonants and Jehovah's Witnesses, gay people, and Romani.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Carol. Thank you, Jennifer. And I know our time is winding down, so I'm going to let Giovanna close it out, or Jennifer, if you had final thoughts. But I did want to mention that for those of you who are there live, I know there's a bookseller there that you can get copies of Jennifer's book and get her to sign it while you're there. You've got Mother's Day, Father's Day, graduation coming up, so buy them for gifts to support the author. And if you are joining us virtually, you can go to our website. I put the link in the chat box. You can visit us online and order a copy of her book. And because she is in San Diego, I can get signed copies and send them out to you. And so thanks for the comments that are coming in, but I'll let Jennifer and Giovanna close it out. Thank you all for coming.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. So thank you to those of you who are here in person and everybody in Zoom world. I'm just having a really hard time navigating this, but I do want to say, in the interest of truth telling and putting it out there, book sales are really important, not only to the success of this book, but to the success of my next book. So if you like what you heard tonight and you want to grab a copy of Girls of the Glimmer Factory, and if you want to give it as a gift, Mother's Day is next week. And what better way to say, Mom, I love you, than a book about Nazi propaganda.
Though there's beautiful friendships throughout the book,
For sure.
which we didn't get into. And there is a mother-daughter exchange too that comes through. So it is so beautiful
Thank
in
you.
the way you close the book.
I really appreciate that. And if you are part of a book club, Susan Macbeth. Oh, you are a book club. All right, well, never mind. I was going to tell you that if you're part of another book club, Susan Macbeth, Adventures by the Book, she handles all my bookings for book club visits. I can Zoom in. And I can come to you if I'm close by, and I really appreciate Adventures by the Book for that service. And if you are someone who rates books or reviews books on Goodreads, and you like the book, I would really appreciate you going on and giving a little love to the books, because it really, my books, because it makes a big difference in helping people decide whether they're going to read the book or not. And if you didn't love the book, you know, we all have our secrets. So thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure seeing you virtually.
Thank you.
You.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
You,
See you next time.
you have a great face to look at. Oh, it's amazing. I was like, I'm gonna put-
Thank you, everyone.
You
And good night.
so beautifully. You're like this, you go.